politicians or the political class to dictate the pace. The young people themselves have to take up the responsibility.
But in Nigeria, isn't it skewed? For the fact that they allowed the young people to dictate the pace by mouth, or they dictate the pace on social media. But when it comes to the real work, we see that these older people are still in charge. Even if you take a look at just the concluded elections, what is the median age of our governors, for example? Across board.
You are absolutely, I mean, that's the issue, especially here in Nigeria. You see, there is a deliberate strategy, and it's wisdom, because they understand that a lot of young people do a lot of talking. They are very good at tweeting. They are very good at Facebooking. But when it comes to strategy, a lot of them lack in that regard. And some of them are not patient enough to study some of those people that have succeeded in those, in their chosen field, that is politics. So they do most of the praise singing, or most of the support, and they've succeeded in dividing the young people along ethnic and religious lines. If you find some of those who champion some of this ethnic bigotry and all that, they are young people, because they know that they sell false narratives to them. That because he's Igbo, is because he's outside, that's why they are doing this to them, that's why they're doing. But it goes beyond that. We've seen a lot of backslapping when politicians meet at parties or functions. They are happy, they're excited. These are people that you find their supporters on the social media, throwing banters, some of them, destroying relationships. But at the end of the day, the people you're fighting over are actually over mending fences and doing things differently. So I think it's much more than that. There needs to be some kind of a deliberate strategy to get the young people to understand that it is not an us versus them kind of. Somebody said something, I think it was in South Africa sometime, that young people are always think that you get everything by revolution. It is not everything that you get by revolution. There are things you get by discussions and negotiations, because if you present a superior argument, or you present a valid argument, and you get people to buy or to toe your line, we have the numbers, we have the people. It just needs someone that can coordinate and rally young people around to give them a sense of direction.
Do you think that Labour has been able to negotiate now to the later or to the end, possibly, with those Bismarck-Rewani report that was submitted? And you're taking a look at perhaps the president will go ahead, because National Assembly has approved the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Do you see it moving forward as more of a political thing? Because the president did this just before the elections, perhaps to also cream out the favor or carry out the favor of labor. So do you think that the executive will follow this to the letter?
Well, I don't see the executive going back, because I think the whole process was done the right way. There was negotiation between the executive and Labour, and then it was sent to the National Assembly for it to be given the effect of like a law and the validity, and it's back to them. Labour will now fight that. But what I was talking about sacrifice, you just nailed it for me. The sacrifice must come from those who are working, and let's start from the executive, legislature, and judiciary to say we need to look at your budget. We need to look at the wastages. You need to do like that. Everybody keeps talking about legislature in Nigeria. There's a lot of wastages in executive too. There are a lot of wastages in judiciary. So what we need to do is to sit down to say, listen, these new people must come into employment. We have to look at your budget. We have to look at your overhead. We have to look at what we don't need. A situation where we're not doing very well, and then we are building new buildings and all that are not necessary. We can hold on to that one. Let everybody review what they're getting. And it will start with the office of the president. We will start with the office of the Senate president. It will start with the legislature.
The president has cut his salary by half. He did that in 2015 with the VP.
Yeah, but that's great. I mean,
but his other allowances will be he will still be collecting extra.
Yeah, but you see, we can write off a lot of allowances. Look at what happened in America when Trump shut down the government. The legislator says that if they keep collecting their salary, it's like blood money on them when Americans are going to the food bank to collect money. So they were donating their own salary to the food bank to be given to people. They must sacrifice. If the leaders are not sacrificing, then there will be a problem on our hands.
So isn't it purely moral? It's moral.
It is moral and the thing to do. First of all, the economy is not growing. There's, like you're saying on the TV, what do you think when recession happens? When there
I'm
was
scared though.
because all those countries,
Because there are signs of it already.
all those countries that got out of
Yeah.
recession, they got out of recession by cutting down on a lot. It took England so much from 2008 till last year. That was when they got out of austerity measures. And they said they're going to start releasing small money. They were cutting everything. It was that bad that where they used to have 2,000 policemen, it was 600. And they were fighting. But you couldn't. The money wasn't there. Things had to be cut. So the Prime Minister must cut his own thing. But we must look at it. The biggest sacrifice must come from our political class. Because that is where the real money is. I mean, it's a big thing, and they must cut money to give opportunities to other people.
Now, let's invite our viewers, for those of you watching and you want to be part of this conversation, feel free to do that. You can reach me now on Twitter at Nancy Ilo. Just find and follow me there. Drop your comments. You can also find and follow the show at Moneyline AIT. Drop your comments. Those are the addresses right now on the screen. I would like to hear from you watching right now. Now, Kingsley, you talked about the dependency ratio earlier. At least we've talked about the productivity level, but if you take a look at it, there's also a linkage one way or the other. Take a look at the dependency ratio in Nigeria. For someone that is earning like 30,000 naira or earning just a bit above 30,000 naira, has a lot of dependents. You see, you mentioned earlier where we have a culture where we take care of our parents and all of that. Your parents send you to school. After sending you to school, I feel very, very sad. In an economy where, after sending you to school, the school is supposed to be like a legacy. You stand on your own, you take care of yourself, and all of that. You even find out that majority of the times, the children come back again to the parents, and the parents are subsidizing the children.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct.
You want to hire a house, your father may still be looking for money for you to give to you to go rent a house. Or you want to buy a car, he would buy it for you, or he gives you some money, or you don't, you know. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we have this circle. Of course, we are not like the West, whereby when your parents are getting old, you take them to the old people's home. We are not like that, you know. We care for our aged people. How does this play into all of this? That's one. Now, let me read this tweet from Blessing Gentle Lord. I don't know if he's a guy now, or it should be a guy, Gentle Lord. Do we need an analyst to tell us, as a bachelor monthly, reality check, rent, light, water, security, he spends 10,500, transport to and fro to work and others 9,000 naira, kerosene 1,000 naira, foodstuff 2,000 naira, Benin City as a case study. So I'm thinking that he's sending this from Benin.
I mean,
how do you just oppose all those that I've said?
Like you said, we are Nigerians. You don't even need an analyst to tell you that we're in a very dire situation as a country with what is proposed. NLC actually proposed 6,000, I think, or thereabouts.
No, they were mulling it, yeah, but they didn't want to,
Yeah, but at the end of the day, of course, there are some factors like the living wage, or that they consider inflation, and a couple of other factors that were put into practice, that were put into consideration when they were forming. You know, they came up with the price. And just like the blessing, the person who sent in his tweet said, if you look at the dependency ratio in Nigeria, and you know, vis-a-vis the amount that you're paid, that you take home, somebody has rightly put it that it's in Nigeria here that you hear things like no one ever gets rich by his or her salary, because you can never cross the million, because you have to, you need to have something else that you're doing to add or to increase whatever income that comes in beyond the investment and all the rest of it. It shows you that whatever you are getting, you need to factor in. In fact, there are some that are civil servants, director or deputy director, but they've been given chieftaincy title in their villages or something, and that confers enormous responsibility on them. It means that anyone who wants to go to school, anyone who has just finished his or her JAMB, anyone, and you find out that, you know, it's a vicious circle. Now the bachelor is telling you he needs to pay for light. That was what I was telling you about trust. He needs to provide water. He needs to, for himself. He needs to ensure that he gets to work on time. There is no affordable. The transport system is not something you can depend on. And when you look at the amount he earns every month and the amount he has to invest to make sure that he gets the job done, and at the end of the day, someone is calling him from somewhere to also part with some fund, it makes it difficult for that person or that individual to be productive at the end of the day. That's why our productivity ratio is declining almost on year-to-year basis. You find out that much more people, things that would have taken you and I maybe 2 or 3 hours to get done. Let's even assume you live in Lagos. Look at the traffic situation there before you get from one point to the other. All these are issues that you need to when you're talking about productivity. All this affects productivity, and if you want, if somebody was giving us a practical example in a forum, he says that we were telling them of the need to have an attitudinal change in our public service, and doing all the preaching and all the sermon, and someone stood up and said, look, these things are grammar. I wake up every morning and I live in Maraba, for instance, and I have to get to work. I know how much it will cost me to navigate my route and get out of my house. Then I get into a bus. I know how many, sometimes I spend over 2 hours. Then sometimes I get to work. I don't have light. There's no diesel in the generator.
You don't have a conducive environment.
No conducive environment to work. And sometimes I get a call from my wife. Probably the child is sick. They need to rush him or her to the hospital. And these things are issues that we encounter on weekly or monthly basis. And someone comes to me and says, do this. It is not that it's not out of the convention. It's just that they need a little support and a little addition. So, and this is the additional money I am getting for doing this differently. What are you asking me to do? Wouldn't I embrace the justification? They are morally justifying. It has come to that stage in Nigeria where people justify some of the issues that we have in our system using some of this. It appears like a blackmail. Then if you are telling them that no, you can still stand that, it appears as if you are insensitive, that you don't understand what the system
you see, with what you're saying, a lot of people will say, oh, in Nigeria you can't have one source of income. Or in Nigeria, like the Yoruba say, Onokon Waja. Did I get it?
Yes, exactly.
It's not only one way to the marketplace, isn't it, in Nigeria? So at the end of the day, you're seeing a lot of Nigerians are like trying to make ends meet. So you are telling that man or that woman that earns like 30 or 40 or 50,000 naira, that if that woman has an avenue or man has an avenue to make $1 million naira as kickbacks, why would the person take it?
Yes.
So in as much as we're even looking at the minimum wage issue, we should look at the structural problem, the foundational problem. We are still talking about minimum wage. In other countries, they're talking about living wage. What is living wage? Living wage is a wage that should definitely take you home
and
meet your basic needs, isn't it? But we'll come now to the ability of states to pay. That's the next discussion, but let's take this few comments. Sabiton on Twitter said, just that in Nigeria, our form of leadership administration is very bad. I guess this is very simple. Otherwise, any state governor that cannot pay the new national minimum wage, which is just 30,000 naira only, should simply resign as a governor of that state. Josh Snow says, until our leaders decide to be patriotic and do their job patriotically, we won't move forward as a country. Let me see if I have other messages to take just before I go to both of you. Wale Bello says, the report of Bismarck Rewani Committee should be made public. What has the report recommended?
That's right.
Hillary says, until the value of the naira is really worth the while, the minimum wage impasse should continue unabated. Okay. Metric says, I'm a consultant. I got an idea where the government fund the minimum wage come from. Okay, where the government should fund the minimum wage, where it should come from comfortably without having to recklessly cause inflation. Versace says, how do we increase our budget? Angola, Egypt, and South Africa have budgets over $100 billion. How do we increase our income to ensure government provides the basic necessities for us? Mr. New Shoes says, what really can someone do with an additional 30K or a 30K salary in this economy, a paper wash economy? Everything is on paper. I pray we have a government that cares about the people. So many comments coming. Hillary says, until the value of the naira, okay, I think I've read that. Girl like Paris says, then they go ahead and increase the minimum wage. The VAT increment shouldn't be for everyone too. Most people don't work for the government. Instead, they are the ones paying the government. Desmond says, isn't it funny that to pay minimum wage we form committee to find where to get the money, but to buy a fighter jet that will come in 2020, we went into our ECA. Exactly. God help us. Victor says, 30K minimum wage can't do nothing. A typical Lagosian like me spends 30K or more for transport alone every month. With this increase of minimum wage, then there will be increment in the cost of living and transportation, feeding not included. Many comments coming through. Can we address?
It's a touchy issue.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
is.
Like we said yesterday, this is
it's
very
emotional. Yes.
It's something that has to do with people. But the way to go, actually, we're just talking about the civil service. The way to go is for us to look at this economy and expand it. It's the private. You could always get good money from the private businesses that are doing well to pay the civil service. If you look at Ogun State moved their IGR from what it was to something very high. And what did they do? They gave incentive to those factories who could not operate in Lagos anymore. So the Nestle of this world, the Cadbury's of this world, just have to drive some kilometers away to get a much bigger land. In that way, they were paying more taxes to Ogun State instead of paying it to Lagos. Lagos needs to be decongested. So states like Ogun State, states like Osun State, states like Oyo State should take advantage of that. I'm very happy about the rail line that's going to go from Lagos to Ibadan. If that is done, there will be a lot of factories now in Ibadan.
Or people would even move.
Thank you. People will move further out and then come back to work.
Yeah.
And then if they know that those things can be transported back to Lagos, Lagos should be seen like the London and the New York of the world, where you don't have to create anything there. There are no factories anywhere inside London. But you bring your goods there, you bring your shoes, you bring your everything there. So if we move all the factories out, that is creating job for those areas. So the governors needs to be creative. There is really no governor that is not creative at this time that will be able to pay this money. But it's not an excuse for them too to say they're not going to pay what they've agreed on, because the 30,000 is not even enough to take these people to bed. So we must pay it, but we must be open to more opportunities, expand the economy, and give more incentive for people.
Kingsley, just as we round up the program, what is your own take? Yesterday, also after the show, we were talking about, you were giving us an example of your son, you know, working, even abroad. You see 16, 17-year-olds interning, getting holiday jobs and all of that. Here in Nigeria,
you don't have such.
You don't have that.
So I think for states need to. We need to look at states. I mean, let states consider their competitive advantages. There are. You have states that have very good, topography, so to speak. Right. Do you know that people? Do you know how much they pay to watch mountain gorillas in Rwanda? It will blow your mind. And we have some of this kind of game reserves. Look at Bauchi, for instance. And you look at states, like you mentioned, where some states can actually consider making their states hub for conventions. It could be regional. It could actually be, national. But whatever it is, innovation is the way to go. States must look inward and begin to look at things that they can turn around to make. It calls for that kind of strategic thinking.
Okay. All right, I think we would anchor here. We've tried as much as possible to, I wouldn't say we've done enough justice to it, but in the past 2 days, yesterday and today, we've been able to look at least some of the sides. Just very quickly, Wulang on Twitter said, I'm a student who Plateau State University studying political science. I actually pick interest in your program, but the issue here is, what's the benefit of the government to me when I pay virtually every bill by myself? Minimum is not only the issue.
Trust. Trust issue.
Osborne says, it is unfortunate that government is confused. We should be talking about the best of living conditions of workers, not minimum wage. That's another topic. That's true. Many thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right, I've been speaking with Tunji Awonusi, an economic analyst. I've also been speaking with Kingsley Okeke, the health consultant at Center for Economic
and Leadership Development.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much
for coming. Let's hope
Thank you, Nancy.
that we'll see the Bismarck
Rwanda report.